So for today's schedule, we have our panel now with Dr. Carla Brown of Game Doctor, Elena Höge from Yaldi Games, Clare Duffy of Civic Digits Theatre Company, Max Scott-Slade from Glitchers, and it'll be chaired by Brian Baglow. Today's panel is also sponsored by Creative Bridge, a free 10-week accelerator programme for creatives run by Codebase. For more information, you can check out the link that will pop in the chat just now, and big thanks again to Creative Bridge and Codebase for sponsoring the panel and helping us to make it happen.
We have an incredible panel of people from a really diverse range of backgrounds looking at an area of gaming that I don't think gets nearly enough attention. So we're going to explore that this afternoon. As Lucy said, questions in the chat, please. Anything that you think is relevant, throw it in there, and our lovely hosts from Tinderbox will keep us updated. But before we do anything else, I'm going to ask our lovely panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about what you do and why you're here this afternoon. So going clockwise for me, Claire, let's start with you first. What brings you here this afternoon?
I knew I was going to go first. Just had to be. Well, to begin with, I suppose I should say that I'm a playwright. That's my main thing. And I've been writing plays for about 20 years. But about 3 years ago, I started talking to my good friend Rupert Goodwins about something that he did when he was in his teens back in the 1980s. And he was telling me about how he hacked Prince Philip's email. And there's this fantastic story about 4 teenagers who were just at the beginning of the internet, sort of becoming a thing, discovering how it worked and kind of finding out what they could do in there. And they were kind of inventing ethical hacking, really, as teenagers, because they were just like exploring where they could get into and what they could do. And they found that they could get into BT Prestel, which was kind of the only publicly available sort of online platform. And because the systems manager had a password of 8 zeros and the username of 1234. So like it was really good security, provisions that they'd taken. So they rang up BT and they told them because they wanted a job, and BT ignored them. So they kept on sort of upping the ante. They changed the value on the site of the pound to the dollar, and they changed the timetable of the trains, and they changed the index front page to idnex. Still BT sort of refused to do anything about it. So eventually Rupert Goodwins went on the 6 o'clock news and showed the world, on the BBC 6 o'clock news, showed the world how he could hack Prince Philip's email. At which point everything kind of went crazy. Mrs. Thatcher and Prince Philip started swearing at the head of BT. And 2 of those 4 hackers were prosecuted and found guilty of forgery, because there wasn't any legislation against, it wasn't a criminal act to hack at the time. They appealed that conviction and they were found not guilty by the House of Lords. So they kind of, because of their hacking as teenagers, they started off the sort of cybersecurity that we're kind of still sort of living with today. So I was talking to him about this and saying, this is a fantastic story, but I don't see why it's a piece of theatre. And he said, well, what about if we could hack the audience's telephones? At which point I thought, that's an amazing idea. Yeah, let's do that. And so we started to build an app. And what our concept was that we could create a game, really kind of like annoying, addictive game that you would play before you came to the show. And then when you came to the show, you'd realise that you'd given permission for the show to do a bunch of things with your phone that you didn't realise that it could, in order to kind of start to explore what data is and how we give it away and what privacy is, what's the value of secrets, and kind of the big questions about, how all of this stuff is affecting our democracy and justice and all those things. So we created this show for a live audience, for a big live audience in Perth Theatre and the Lyceum Theatre, for young people, so that we could really sort of challenge them to think about their curiosity about cyber resilience, think about their well-being in this space. So of course COVID happened. So we had to pivot the whole thing online, and we delivered it last year in the autumn term. And so when when the audience arrive at our sort of online theatre space, we have a lobby where you can find a hidden game, you can enter the show code, and then you can play this initial annoying game called Super Swipe. And then if you can hack the app, and we tell you how to do it, you hack the app, and then that reveals hidden games. Behind that, we've got an infinite runner game called Infinite Rupert, but we're also able to mess with your phone, make it change colour, send you text messages, send you sound, send you video, and we're also able to show you your GPS every time you played the game before you arrived at the show, which is a little bit creepy. So that's the game that we've made. It's all about sort of cyber resilience and cyber health, but what we're going to be doing next is hopefully making our next show, which is called Bad Actor, and we're going to be making a data-driven robot, a data-driven actor, so that the audience can play with using their own data to puppet or manipulate a robot that's actually acting with real live actors. So that's kind of some of the sort of top things that we're doing at the moment. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense, yeah. You know, video games as avant-garde theatre meets cybersecurity. I can't think of anything that makes more sense. That's incredible. That's incredible. And we're going to come back to a few of those points, because the way that you're thinking about games, I think, is wonderful. But thank you, Claire. That's fantastic. If your minds are not blown yet, folks, then, you know, I don't know what's going on with you. Elena, let's come to you next. Tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do.
Well, so I founded a young startup last year. It's called Yaldi Games. And our mission basically is to seamlessly integrate learning into commercial games. So we're really focusing on the commercial aspect of the game. And by doing that, we're trying to reach a bigger audience, like a big, broad audience, and then teach them something without them quite, knowing that they're being taught, at least not caring about it too much. And yeah, so that's really what we're doing. And our first title is called Wholesome Out and About. And it's a life simulator game that can teach you about foraging, cooking, and crafting. So what we're doing really is trying to build a bridge between digital and analog. I just feel like a lot of games, they give you these nice fictional settings, and then they leave you playing in them. And we always enjoy that. It's fun, it's entertaining, but we could go that extra step, we could go that extra mile, and we could integrate real information. And so that's what Wholesome is all about, really. It's about integrating real plants and mushrooms so that you can see them, and you can learn the characteristics of how to differentiate them. And then you can actually learn real recipes, and you can download them, you can recreate them at home, you can recreate crafting instructions. So it's really all about using that popular game genre and just putting in some real information in there. Oh, you're muted.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, you'd think after a year and a half of lockdown we would be better at this. That's incredible. And the tie-in with the real world is something, again, we're going to come back to. But that's wonderful, Elena. Carla, let's come to you next.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much.
Good.
I had an opportunity to put on a nice shirt today for the first time. And,
Good. Great. Yeah, so thanks again for inviting me. I'm super happy to be at this festival, and to be honest, I'm pretty blown away by the number of attendees. My name is Carla. I'm the founder of Game Doctor, which is a small studio in Glasgow. And we're super niche, but we're super exciting in that we develop games, mobile games for public health interventions. So I guess I went on a bit of a journey before I started Game Doctor, in that I was a microbiologist for like 7 years. And then I worked in Public Health England, developing interventions for behaviour change. And then I done a postdoc in gamification for health in the States. So I am just super passionate about the use of games for health. There's so much evidence to validate and demonstrate their benefits and their impact. And hopefully today I can convince you guys a lot more of that and contribute to that discussion through that.
Try again. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carla. And last but very much not least, Max, how about you?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to be here. I'm Max. I'm the director of Glitches Games. We used to be based in London. Now we've moved up recently to Edinburgh. So super excited to be part of this kind of Scottish focused event. So I've built video games for a long time, but I got into the industry by accident. I think a lot of people do get into the industry by accident. It's not something you kind of, until recently, could get into deliberately. I started off doing graphic design and just messing around with Flash, making animations and stuff like that on Newgrounds. And fast forward throughout my career very, very briefly, I did the kind of normal games, the kind of fun games, the stuff for pure entertainment. And then luckily, I think around 2015 or something like that, an incredible opportunity came up where I got to work with neuroscientists to build a game to help them build a navigational database of healthy people. So we use a casual mobile game, in this case, a game called Sea Hero Quest, to build a database that researchers could use to try and identify early signs of navigational deterioration, but through a game. So you play it like a casual mobile game, and your contribution is, traversing these puzzles, which feels very much like a game you might find on the App Store. But the data that comes out of it is super valuable to researchers. Now, that was like the first step on our quest to build games that have meaning beyond entertainment. And we find ourselves now followed that up with a virtual reality version that added an additional piece of information for the scientists to check head orientation. And now we've gone into mental health, healthcare, and we're also in fintech as well. So we've got a product which teaches kids about financial literacy, a thing that sits on the parent's device and helps them keep track of kind of pocket money and their chores, but also teaches them about like digital currencies and financial education. And we have an unannounced project with a company in the Netherlands which is focused on obesity therapy. So building a kind of game proportion to what is at the moment an offline therapy. So there's this kind of amazing duality between the real world and then this really awesome game that kind of supports that interaction. So yeah, that's Glitches in a nutshell. I'm really excited to get into the chat.
Fantastic. Well, that's incredible. I think you'll agree, folks, that you've got a really, really diverse and interesting range of backgrounds here. So I think I'm going to kick off. So way back, Lucy mentioned that I worked on Grand Theft Auto and went from writing into the marketing. And when the game came out, I was all set to appear on Newsnight. So I'm going to start with what Jeremy Paxman asked me, and the reason that the publisher then wouldn't let me on Newsnight and use the managing director instead. He said, "You can't expect me to believe that adults play these things, can you?" No, obviously not. But I want to kind of drill into this notion that we have this misconception in the UK that games are digital toys and therefore they're for kids, and they really don't have any redeeming social value. And I think that you guys are absolutely proving that there's such a huge amount more to gaming. And can I ask, first of all, what brought you into this area? Because none of you come from a games background. Max, I know you did computer science, and Elena, you did design, but you're not graduates from games courses. So what interested you in games in the first place? Open to all of you. Go for it, Claire.
Well, for me, I made a show called Money the Game Show about 5, 6, maybe actually longer than that, about 8 years ago, where I put £10,000 in pound coins on stage, divided the audience into 2 teams and sort of taught them how the financial crash of 2007-8 happened by getting them to play competitive games to show them how hedge fund management worked. Mm-hmm. And the stakes were you couldn't take the money home, but if your hedge fund manager turned performance artist, if you lost for your hedge fund manager turned performance artist, they would kill themselves. So So, and they did with a lot of tomato sauce and Mozart. That was an amazing experience for me because it made me see just like how games can give an audience an embodied experience of the core emotion of the story that you're trying to tell. And sort of, I haven't looked back since then because I just thought the engagement of the audience, they were standing on their feet baying at their sort of different participants to win. And it was all about, why people lose their heads in financial crashes. And it's like, well, you've just done it. So like games have this incredible potential for embodied understanding, I think. And that's why I'm really interested in using them as part of my storytelling.
Wonderful, Claire. Thank you. Max?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, right? How did you end up here? I think initially it was the fact that, some people are very much visual thinkers. Some people are kind of logical thinkers, but there are people that kind of exist in both camps. And I struggled with the fact that I couldn't code and do graphic design at the time when I was doing it. And it wasn't necessarily something that was kind of enabled. So I managed to find this amazing place where I could do that. And it was games where I could bring like animation, I could bring the design, and I could bring that kind of knowledge of how the stuff gets structured together in systems. And it just made it felt like such a great place to be. And it really, really resonated with me personally. Why am I still here? I think it's because, I think going through making lots of entertainment products, and yeah, that's amazing and in its own right. But seeing how games can have an impact beyond that and be beneficial for learning, education, behavioural change, and all these other fields, I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg. So it's a great place to be again, just to kind of see where this thing goes.
Thank you, Max. Elena?
Yeah, honestly, I always wanted to work in the games industry. So when I was 11, it's almost, I knew, I played Zelda and I knew. But the funny thing is that I had a hard time finding my way into the games industry because there was just no information. Like, what do you study to get into the games industry, right? So it was always, back then, it was all about people just crossing from other industries. And but there weren't a lot of games courses, at least, back then when I studied. And all of these games courses, they were kind of focused on game design with programming and not game design like just independently from programming. And I'm bad at math, so like I always knew, well, programming wasn't for me, so I needed to find another way. And so I knew that if I wanted to start my own company, I knew I needed business skills and IT skills. I didn't quite know that there were different, languages for games and other things. So I learned Java, unfortunately, and I did a business computing course. And then I finally found at the University of Edinburgh a nice course, that I could actually learn something about game design and learn about design in general. And that was like amazing for me, honestly, changed everything, going from exams to submissions, going from just like simple, like just studying and learning and just everything getting in your brain and then writing it on paper and then forgetting about it, to going to actually creating something digital and being creative. So that was amazing. And yeah, that was basically my journey. I mean, everything that I did, working as, on an e-learning platform as a project manager and an ops manager, and just game design researcher and contractor for some dog. It was really all about getting me to that point where I could start my own games company. So I do want to really help with other, getting people to understand what the ideal route into the games industry is, because I've never found it. And I just always felt that, well, I just need to make my own company if I want to work in the games industry. That's just what I got to do. And so, yeah, that's how I got here.
Superb. Thank you so much. And Carla, how about yourself? The academic route from a very different angle.
So this is my favourite story ever. In 2013, I was doing my PhD at Glasgow and I was developing new antibiotics. So as part of my PhD, I wanted to develop a public campaign to educate people on antibiotic resistance. And I was doing public seminars, festival, pop-up stands. And then I started going to game conferences because I was really intrigued to see how games could be used as a tool to to really communicate the problem of antibiotic resistance, which thankfully I won't get into today. And we developed this, first of all, a card game called Bacteria Combat, which is kind of like Pokemon, but for bacteria. And then we evaluated it in schools around Scotland, and then we got a bit more money and made an app version and then tested it again. And by 2014-15, you know, the benefits and the value for games was just completely undeniable to me. And I'd made so many connections at that point that I was ready to take a step away from research and explore the game journey. So yeah, it was such a great project.
That's phenomenal. I mean, nobody would have thought that bacteria could be a starting point for a flourishing career in video games.
Everything, bacteria is always a starting point in my life for some reason.
Well, I think it was the start of all of us, wasn't it? If you go far enough back. We've got a lot of questions coming in, but I'm going to sort of, I guess, introduce the idea right now that you guys are in a fairly unique position because we still have something of a notion of what video games are. And, you know, there's a growing amount of evidence coming through from everybody, from the folks at UK through to the Literacy Trust, that games have immense value, not just for kids and young people and in terms of education, but having a positive impact on people's mental health and well-being. You know, there was a wonderful documentary on the BBC a few weeks ago that looked specifically at the value that games, including Grand Theft Auto, has to some players and how it lets them connect with people. And in very different ways, you're doing exactly that. It's, you know, you're giving players a way to explore different, you know, aspects, elements, activities of, you know, either performing arts or you know, the public health. Are you finding a lot of interest out there? Are you finding resistance? Are people still thinking that games are digital toys? Or is it that people, you know, biting your hand off? Carla, yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to kick this off. So we had a little bit of chats about this last week, and it's really interesting right now in that you see different types of resistance from different industries. So I've actually been told by a few of my colleagues that we shouldn't use the word game when we speak to our partners and our collaborators. So, you know, Game Doctor, we typically work with universities, we work with Public Health England, we also work with private companies. But a lot of the time when we are developing projects with our healthcare clients, it's sometimes better not to use the word game because there still is that slight resistance. And yeah, I think just you going out to the panel, it's interesting how all of us have had different resistances in different ways.
I think that's interesting. Anyone else? Kane's comment? Oh, Max first and then Claire.
I think I got it by a nanosecond. Yeah, games are weird because people do still tend to think of them as like console games, or like these people that like are in dark kind of cave rooms playing with neon lights all around them. And yeah, there is that, and that is great. But there's also in some ways people don't think that mobile games are games. They also think like, I don't play games, and then literally 2 seconds later they're playing Candy Crush. What? That's a game? Come on. So I think there's a disconnect. I don't think people always know what games are. Like solitaire is a game, but humans love games. And I think there is a resistance to almost admitting that people are having a good time with things that could possibly be conceived as childish or toy-like. So I think there's a little bit of that. But when it comes to kind of like the research side or the kind of serious game side, there's a huge amount of stigma because people take their jobs very seriously and they don't want to be associated with something that is probably going to maybe like dilute that or fundamentally change the way it's perceived. But in actual fact, like See Here Quest is great because it came from a commercial partner and some very forward-thinking neuroscientists. And up until about a year after the project was closed, people were still like, no, Absolutely not. And then when they're actually publishing that data in journals and going, look, we can detect decline in dementia through certain levels of CH requests up to 10 years before you could otherwise. Then people go, okay, what? What? So that's when you suddenly have proof. And I think that kind of proof works really well for the whole industry. And the more we have, examples of that, I think that stigma will go away.
Fabulous. Thank you, Max. And Claire?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I suppose I was thinking about how maybe we still think in like tight little bubbles. So we're going to think, well, if you're making performance, you're making performance. And if you're making a game, you're making a game, and that's for fun and it's not for learning. And if you're doing learning, so all these things we struggle perhaps culturally to kind of go, you can do all three of those things or many other things all at the same time. And it's at the intersection of those things that it gets really interesting. But like Carla was saying, I get told not to talk about myself as a theatre company or a performance company or an education company or making games. Like all of the things that I'm doing, different people want to sort of go, but don't talk about that bit. So we really struggle to kind of know how to define ourselves in a way that's, going to be sort of useful. But I guess the thing to do is just to keep making the work, and then people will kind of come to it from whichever angle that they're going to come to it, and they'll find out what they like about it. Along the way, but I think it's really changing. We're working with Heriot-Watt University to make games. It's a 3-year project to make games for their for citizen coders to really try to improve the cybersecurity, the security of the sort of citizen coder out there, and that's been funded by called the Engineering Society, or really kind of like powerful, very kind of serious academic organisation. So I think there is an acknowledgement that the games can work.
Yeah. That's an amazing point, and I think you've all touched on different elements of this, which is that the notion of video games, as you said, Max, is kind of outdated. It either has to include Space Marines and explosions, or matching 3 of something and making it go pop. But to kind of flip this around and look at the point of view from some of our audience members, you've all come from very different backgrounds, as we've established. How would you think, is there a way that, teachers, educators, parents, people who are interested in exploring games in a different way, where can they start? Where do you begin looking to sort of see games that have a far more valuable and I don't want to say worthwhile, but positive impact, because it can be so impenetrable, and the huge games, the landmark titles can be so big. Where do you even begin? Yes, there are no small questions here. Max, you want to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really a good place to start necessarily on the places you think, right? Everyone thinks that games are played on consoles, and sometimes that can be the most expensive place to put a game. Go where it's cheap to make games, because where it's cheap, there's a lot of innovation. Go where it's accessible to make games, because again, there's lots of innovation. I'd say if you wanted to get into the nitty gritty of like what is a game, and you've got like a reasonable computer sat in front of you, you could look on. I don't know if I should tell you to go to itch.io, but because there's some questionable content on there. But where there's innovation, there's questionable content. I think the App Store is good as well, but you kind of got to do your research and find the odd stuff. I think games like Papers, Please are really incredible. Like Among Us, if you haven't played that, that's brilliant. And you can do that on Zoom, perfect lockdown game. Even like the Jackbox party games are really fun to play. These are kind of showing you games in a way that kind of merge with other tech and allow you to like bring something which you have, like your phone, to the whole thing. But I would probably suggest going to one of Claire's shows because she's doing something really unique with games. There's lots of places. But yeah, I really think if you pick up a console controller and you're going to go, right, I'm going to play the latest Assassin's Creed and see what's new in games. All you're going to find out is what is new technology-wise. Yeah. Like how many kind of weird characters can we get crammed on the screen at once? When you spin your axe around, all the heads are going to come off. Go to the consoles if you want to see that stuff. There are cool things there, but just the front and center stuff is going to be that. So yeah, go places you don't expect and you'll find good stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the indie games that bring out the most innovative gameplay and the most sensitive and sensible content. Just it's just because the commercial giants that produce the games that actually get in front of people because they have gigantic marketing budgets. They're not going to create an educational game. I mean, the most they will do is maybe integrate at some point some kind of knowledge like Assassin's Creed did. And that was actually great. I mean, I loved how they did it. It opened my eyes to that it's possible. It's just that they never went the step further to actually pursue that, and they won't because it's a cash cow. It makes money, so they are producing. I don't know. Is it the 14th game now? The mechanics haven't changed. It's the characters, and it's So innovation clearly not part of big corporations, but really there are some great companies out there, some really creative games, and I think mental health more and more. So a Google or something can always just help you get a good list of where to start.
Fabulous, Elena. Claire?
I was going to say that one of my favourite games is Zombies Run, which is it's sort of so simple, but it's just a genius concept that you can listen to this story and you're running. So if there's zombies chasing after you, you might run a little bit faster. So I was going to say that rather than thinking about kind of where to look for because you're into games, maybe thinking about what you're into and then finding out what games there are about that subject. Because that's how I find the games that I like. I'm into running, and then I find Zombies Run or, something like that.
Splendid. Thank you, Claire. Carla?
I was just going to add, there's an amazing project in Scotland called the Digital Extra Fund. And what they do is they actually fund projects such as games run by schools, organisations, individuals. You can get about, £3,000-4,000. So if you do have an idea or you're looking to pilot something with an organisation or another group, give them a call. Craig works there. He's fantastic. And they are excited to fund projects such as these. And they're actually just about to open their next grant. So definitely check them out.
Yeah. Fabulous point. Thank you. It saves me making it, Carla, because, it's if you're interested in helping young people engage with digital technology in Scotland, it's a great step forward. Carla, I want to come back to you because your current project, Remedy Quest, is absolutely relevant to where we are right now in terms of the pandemic and lockdowns and COVID-19. And we've had a couple of people with questions from the healthcare and clinical side of things. Can you tell us a little bit more about Remedy Quest first, please? Sure.
In June 2020, I paired up with a health psychologist. Well, Game Doctor paired up with a health psychologist from Stirling University. And we put in an Innovate UK application to develop a mobile game around COVID. And the goal for the game was to work with teenagers to reduce their anxiety, improve their compliance with social distancing, and also educate them on hygiene and how to really just prevent COVID from spreading. The project was amazing. We had 6 months to design, develop, soft launch a mobile game, which was intense but fun. And what we made was a game called Remedy Quest, which is currently on Android in Google Play. And the whole concept of the game was informed by research with young people. So what we found that 80% of people that we spoke to had anxiety against COVID, and a lot of it had stemmed from anxiety around when there would be a cure and when there would be a vaccine. So to really address that, we created a story in the game where they would create their own vaccines and their own remedies against a virus. We didn't mention COVID. And it's a casual game, so it's very quick to play. You can play in 15 minutes. And we just went for it. We soft launched it to the US in November. And we've had quite good traction. And we've found that not only does the game reduce anxiety, it improves learning on COVID, hygiene, and vaccines. So what's super exciting is we're hopefully going to be pairing up with a group in the US to really disseminate it widely. The Innovate UK money was an amazing start, but it was really only enough to build a beta. So we're looking for further funding now. And I think, like, you know, what's really amazing about Remedy Quest is we've created these beautiful, powerful avatars for our vaccines. One of them is she's just this gorgeous woman goddess creature, and we really wanted to send the message that vaccines they're powerful, they're fantastic, they work, and also give young people a positive place to live out these anxieties that are worrying them and address them as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carla. And I'm going to pick up one of the questions from the audience, which is directly relevant to that, which is, and I guess this is for you, Carla, and you, Max. How much input and how much advice do you have from clinicians and from the medical side of things when you're creating something like Remedy Quest or indeed Sea Hero Quest?
I'll just quickly reel off the team behind Remedy Quest. So we worked with a psychologist called Dr. Pamela Racco from Stirling University. We worked with Professor David Robertson, who's a leading COVID-19 expert at Glasgow University. And we worked with COVID-19 researchers from Queen's Belfast University. And they were involved at absolutely every stage of the development and the testing. So to answer the question, we have stakeholders involved all the way through.
Wonderful. Thank you. Max?
Yeah, and on my side, Sea Hero Quest or any project that we do, we start, I call our kind of client projects collaborations because I believe that they start and they're gestated together with the people that we're building the problem solving games with. So in our case, the clinicians or the researchers were there day one. They were involved. We're actually adapting some of their experiments into the Sea Hero Quest world. We worked with, the list of people on the neuroscience team, it spans lots of different countries, but the ones in the UK, it was a partnership with UEA. So there's a kind of dementia kind of unit there, which focusing on kind of like the unhealthy side of dementia, people who already have it. We took some of their navigation experiments, and that's led by Michael Hornberger. I love that guy. He's amazing. Then also UCL, we had Hugo Spears. He runs Spears Lab, and also another dude, like really cool people, amazing team under them. And just like really early doors is the answer. And I think that if we hadn't have done that, we would have been so game focused. So just to touch on a slight bit of the process, translating some experiments, creating new experiments in collaboration with the scientists, and then also testing the data that came out with different institutes around the world and designed for machine learning first. So the data had to be spat out, ready to go straight into machine learning algorithms that would take that navigation data and convert it into presentable charts and graphs and stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Claire and Elena, I mean, you're coming at things from a different angle. I mean, Claire, you're a playwright as your background. So where did you bring the games side in? Did you work with somebody externally, or was this based on
Yeah, we started off working actually with Abertay University when we had like a tiny bit of sort of seed commissioning back in 2017. We paid some students to do some workshops with us, and that's kind of how we sort of started. And then we started working with we found some game studios to work with. So yeah, we haven't like done the coding, we've done the designing with them. But by the time we kind of sort of knew, so we worked out, sort of mapped out the plots, if you like, of the game and how it would work and why. And then worked with gaming studios to make it.
Fabulous. And Elena, you've already told us you're a gamer.
Yeah.
So also a forager? Is this where?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I started foraging just 2 years ago, but I instantly loved it. I realized it was like a treasure hunt, and I also realized that I didn't know anything about nature, not a lot anyway. And there were so many questions that were popping up, and I was really curious about them. And I just realized that could be a great game. I was working on another game before that was more mental health focused, but actually I realized that if I could create a game that could get people out, could get them to forage, or maybe just recognize the, one plant or something on a walk or a tree or something, then I could maybe increase people's time outside as well, and increase that, the happiness that comes from the health and the well-being that comes from being outside. So for me, it's what I'm doing is I'm creating a game that is very, very similar to already established games. So I'm looking at them for inspiration. But what I'm doing is I'm consulting foragers, biologists to then actually write the content of, the plants and everything. So that's all done by experts. And the rest is really just integrated into the game. And it's quite a simple approach. But, I hope by giving people a recipe, then that could maybe have some, conversion rate of people doing that in real life. And so what I want to do is to do some studies when the game is in a beta stage or something, to actually then measure if people are doing something analog, and if we can create change, social change, public change, if we can get people more outside and then just increase that time, or give them some perspectives on new hobbies or something off screen. So yeah,
and again, thank you so much for the really busy chat session, everybody, because there are some fantastic points and some really good questions. One that I really want to come back to, and this is almost a session in its own right, is the use of games within the classroom, or even within a healthcare situation where you don't necessarily have people who are the most up-to-date in terms of technology or access to the, anything but the most basic tech. So you think this is an area that we can and indeed should be exploring moving forward? Oh, Max, your hand shot up.
I've got, I think, a really nice example. I won't take up too much of the chat, and maybe there'll be some more questions that come from it. See Here Request was initially on mobile, and then we did a version in VR. And it was amazing because we could actually target older players with the VR version. They definitely don't have a headset, but there were what, there's a word for it, cohort groups. There were cohort groups of people that existed that could actually have this device taken to them. And there was a good amount of research done with the VR version. And it was amazing to see the difference. Someone who has not grown up with a mobile phone, who struggles with the idea of a touch screen. And I know that a lot of older people do get mobile phones and touchscreens and stuff like that, but a game as well to kind of drag your finger to move the boat around. To just take that away and go, right, you've got one thing in your hand that is basically when you click, you go where you look. Done. Get in the game. It just took the barrier right down. I thought that was a really cool thing about the VR version, which I didn't expect. I thought more technology complexity, more like higher barrier to entry, and it actually wasn't the case. So that was super interesting, and one way how, See Here requested that.
Superb, thank you, Carla.
Just to touch on that, we work with, in Public Health England, a range of different stakeholders. So it might be a clinician who, as Max was kind of talking about, doesn't use games, doesn't really feel familiar with interactive technology, all the way down to PhD students, to younger patients. And we kind of do a similar approach in that we look for platforms and technology that our client or our collaborator feels comfortable with. But then also, when we communicate game ideas or we communicate the project, I actually do it in a way that is almost like a scientific paper. So for us, our design documents are almost like scientific papers, because I know that my collaborator or my partner is going to understand that in 2-3 hours rather than taking it a lot longer. So yeah, I think for me, it's almost been trying to create a new language with my customers and my partners and my clients. And then once they have that confidence and that knowledge, they're always a little bit more comfortable when it comes to the mobile app or the technology.
That's fantastic, Carla. And a really interesting point about redefining language. And I think it is, we do have a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings between, the various silos and vertical markets. Claire, Elena, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, so the Big Data Show does go into classrooms. Mm-hmm. Like, it's been designed, and that was the only live audience that we could get as well last autumn. So we were just delighted that we were making something for a live audience that actually could meet and be in the same room together. And I think there's loads of potential for it. And when we were developing it, we were actually taking it as, touring into schools with actors, so that the pupils were playing the game on their phone in the theatre space, and the actors were interacting with them. That was kind of even more magical. And many teachers actually said to us that they would like to have kind of a version of this app that we've created so that they could use it in their classroom. So we're exploring what that would take at the moment, so that you could kind of have the sort of the skeleton, if you like, of Super Swipe, which has a game, but you could put your own game at the beginning, or you can put your own content into that kind of skeleton of being able to send a whole classroom that bit of video or that document or that whatever it is that you want to send them. And I think that's sort of part of trying to kind of question how we use this smart technology that's in our phones, that we carry around just like every day, and we don't really think about it, and it's often seen as a distraction and a bad thing. And how do we sort of embrace it as a creative tool that we can, make our lives and our learning experiences richer, rather than having to constantly say to young people, put your phone away. So that's kind of some of the things that we've been thinking about.
I completely agree. I think it's really important to look at your audiences. Who do you want the game to play? Is it younger kids? Is it older people? Is it just the middle? Is it like, where should they play? Should it play in a classroom? Because schools, they tend to not have the best equipment. It's not their fault. It's there's not enough budget. When I did research for some doc, there were 20 iPads for an entire school, and the teachers actually had to make sure that they book the iPads for the right time. And I mean, some of the laptops, maybe there's not an IT service that can actually update the laptop. So when you're actually using the laptops, you first have a Windows update. So that's I mean, planning with all that is hard. So you really need to do some reconnaissance kind of. And so what I did was we decided on the mobile platform for now, because it has the lowest entry barrier. So almost everyone has a mobile phone. So you really can get the game into people's hands. And just recently, I actually made changes to the controls of the game, because I realized that it's going to be much easier for younger kids and especially older people to play the game if, for example, I'm not using both thumbs to navigate, because that requires a lot of attention. You need both hands. It's quite complicated, actually. For gamers, it's very simple. They just do it. It's like natural, but for everyone else, it's a barrier, it's a wall. So really reducing that was quite important for us. So we changed our controls this week, and that was a massive change, because now we need to have a look at our levels and design again. But we did that so that we can make playing easier for people, and that's all that it is about, really.
Wow, excellent, Claire. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I completely agree that's why we went for mobile phones as well, because not only sort of like, the cultural feeling of them, but also because we thought that most people have mobile phones, right? But actually there's a lot of digital poverty out there, and you can't rely on young people having phones, or phones that work, or, work with your app, because it's 5 years old or whatever. There's a lot of barriers. We were really lucky that we got some secondhand phones from Skyscanner, so we were able to rock up with phones for the young people to use. But then, of course, they like to mess with them, so that's a lot of work as well, having to kind of clean the phones up after 30 or 100 even young people have been messing about with them for an hour and a half. But yeah.
Again, some wonderful points, and I want to thank you all. We're down to the last few minutes. Just a couple of very quick points I want to make is that for all the people in the audience, at the tail end of 2020, we had what was called the Logan Review in Scotland, which is looking at creating a more successful tech ecosystem, but it addresses the use of technology and the teaching of technology and computing science in Scotland from primary school all the way through to university. And there's going to be an awful lot of changes happening there quite quickly in the next 12 months. And also, there's been a real drive, I think it was announced this morning, that more and more companies and businesses out there are being asked to donate old equipment to schools and to children and young people who are in exactly that situation, Claire, where they don't have a smartphone or an iPad. They don't want to use the grotty, class iPad. So there's a move to get more and more devices into the hands of people all over the country. So I think we are going to see some changes there. So just if you're in the audience and you're wondering about this, we will try and pull all of this information together for you. Lucy, somebody asked if we can have a resource list. And I would like to offer a partnership with the Scottish Games Network to help produce just such a thing, a starting point for anybody who's interested in the whole notion of using games in different ways. And we can mention the Digital Extra Fund and everything. So just before we wrap up, folks, is there anything that we've missed, anything that you would really like to say to the people out there listening who are fascinated by not only what you're doing, but how they get more involved, whether it's in teaching, whether it's in healthcare, or whether it's their own mental health? Yes, Claire.
I know I have to just do a little plug because I'm doing my show on 3 p.m. on Thursday, the 25th. So this Thursday at 3 p.m. Come along and see the Big Data Show.
I've got tickets. Anyone else? Carla, can you tell us anything about Remedy Quest in the UK? Can we help reassure our own children and people?
Yeah, the beta is available on Google Play, so feel free to download it and stay tuned for us hopefully coming with a better version with this fantastic US partner. Yeah.
Superb. Max, if you would.
Well, it's a small plug as well. We've got a game out at the moment. It's free on the App Store and on Android. It is called Nestlems, and it will help your children earn money and track their chores and all that. There's a new update coming out in a couple of months, which is going to be a massive, massive overhaul. So if you've got any feedback or input that you want to kind of target towards us now, it's a good time. So yeah, Nestlems on the App Store or Android. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. Elena, when can we hope to see Wholesome out and about?
Oh, well, with the redesign, I was hoping that I could do like a closed beta and then do this measuring of the conversion rate sometime around May. But what I also want to offer is just any assistance if someone needs to have a chat with someone who's a designer. It's just, I've been helping people who approach me, about game design, and it's just really like what I want to do is just help people get a broader understanding, like build a bridge between the games industry and other industries, like be a point of contact. So if anyone is thinking about making a game, I'm happy to just give some advice, use some feedback, some mechanic ideas, just anything, like really just off charge of anything, just to help build a bridge. And yeah.
Thank you. And what's your website so people can track you down in a non-creepy way?
Yes, that's yaldigames.com. So that should be fairly simple. You could just type Yaldi.
I'm just aware it's a working day and, people will have other calls and other meetings and everything. So I would like to thank all of you very sincerely because it's been completely fascinating, an area we could have spent the entire afternoon on. I feel we've only just scratched the surface. So fingers crossed when Playway comes back for its triumphant second year, we can all come back and show off what we did in the last 12 months. Yeah. So thank you all. I would also like to thank Creative Bridge, as Lucy mentioned up front, for sponsoring this session. A free 10-week programme for creatives run by Codebase, and Lucy will absolutely be throwing the link.
I did that actually. I was part of Creative Bridge.
That's right. Elena did it.
I'm doing it right now.
It's completely awesome. So thank you all. Thank you, Tinderbox. Thank you, Jed. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. Don't be strangers. Keep in touch. And I'll hopefully see you at the next Playway session.